Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in the absence of a clear direction on Brexit, we're going to be lurching from one extreme to the other, and today is no different. Ahead of a little video on a barely plausible Brexit compromise later today, I'd like to start the day off by taking a look at the panic buying related to COVID in March in the UK, and how this could be a herald of what might face us at the end of the year if a no-deal Brexit in its real sense comes into play. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So, from my point of view as a consumer, the empty shelves followed a well-reported pattern as the prospect of COVID isolation emerged a few months ago. First of all, it was the toilet rolls and the dried pasta. Didn't bother me. I don't like pasta, and I didn't need any toilet paper at the time. I also didn't bother to stockpile because I knew that supplies weren't disrupted as such, and so any scarcity would be temporary, and indeed such proved to be the case. But then came other things that I do need to restock on regularly. In order to deal with the increased buying, producers narrowed their range. This is why I can't get any Heinz mulligatawny soup anymore. Home baking aisles looks like locusts had hit it. Even now, it's difficult to get all the ingredients you'd need for baking. It's a lot easier now than it was. It's a lot better than it was. Essentially, any shortages that still exist, and there are some, are entirely as a result of demand remaining high. And this may have something to do with the fact, which I didn't know at the time, that 30% of what we consume in Britain is done so outside of the home, eating out and so on. I mean, with pubs and restaurants shut in, I suppose it would be inevitable to anyone who was fully appraised of that fact that we would of course be buying more stuff from supermarkets and other grocery stores. Now, I did also see mention of someone trying to suggest that there was no panic buying, just extra buying as a result of this fact. Bollocks. People weren't buying 50 toilet rolls in one go because they wouldn't be going out to the restaurant that week. But although there were empty shelves for a while, it didn't last that long. At the time I said that supermarkets had done really well in dealing with the crisis quickly. Out of all the industries in this country, they coped very, very well. And it turns out there's a reason for this, and it's because they'd been planning for such a scenario for a long time. Apparently back in 2010, Tesco wargamed such a scenario, and unlike the government with their pandemic planning from 2016, actually used the results to make sure they'd be ready when the time came. But this scenario could of course face us again, and in a much more serious form, if Boris Johnson doesn't find a Brexit compromise to satisfy both the EU and his own backbenchers. In addition, bear in mind that demand for food is already high in December due to Christmas feasting, or solstice feasting if you're a druid, I guess, or for whatever other reason that you eat a lot at Christmas. People cram their food cupboards, and so there is likely to be no capacity to cope with a January no-deal Brexit if supply chains are disrupted. Combined with panic buying from people worried about Brexit in 2021. And this will of course have a serious impact on the most vulnerable in society. For all my moaning about mulligatawny soup and Marmite, I know that it is just petty moaning. I'm not really moaning about it, because there are those who couldn't afford to stockpile and will not be able to afford to stockpile, and they have to be able to get the small amounts of food that they can afford on a regular basis, and they will obviously suffer. But The Guardian, who were writing about this topic earlier this week, noted some other issues as well that were quite interesting. So it said, first of all, so charities tend to arrange, of course, with supermarkets to take their surplus stock off their hands, prevents food wastage, and also means you can get that food to the people who really need it, those who are let down by the government. And when the March panic buying began, there were reports of supermarkets not really having anything to spare. And the chief executive of charity FareShare said almost overnight these charities had their supply cut off at the knees. There was nothing we could do. And for everyone like me, like I say, who moans about soup or not being able to get the Marmite, there are those on a serious level that for whom this means they do without food altogether. Fortunately, businesses did step up to the crease on this one. Supermarkets donated a lot of money, and they've made a lot of money as well, to be fair, but they still, they took action. Even the hospitality trade donated its excess food. Obviously, it had a lot of food in stock that it wasn't going to be able to use. That was donated as well. There were a number of other impacts from the chaos in March and April as well. But I'll post a link to the article to read for yourself, because not all of them are going to be relevant in the case of a hard Brexit, and that's what I want to focus on. Because a hard Brexit, unlike the lockdown, will not close restaurants and hotels, for example, and there's a lot of issues that were around that. But throughout the shortages earlier this year, I kept saying, both on this channel and to people, just from my observations as a consumer, what we had there was a heightened demand caused by uncertainty. We didn't have supply issues. COVID did not at any time impact seriously on the supply lines. It will do, but it hasn't as yet. Now, if people had not stockpiled, there wouldn't have been any issues at all. There was the extra buying, okay, because of not going out to restaurants, fine, but it would have been fine. Now, with a hard Brexit, the situation is more extreme, because if we find ourselves in November without a deal, at that point, it's going to be too late to ratify anything that is agreed later on, or at least by the end of the year. At this point, the stockpiling will surely begin. Now, in circumstances like these, unless I'm satisfied that the government genuinely have a plan to secure trade routes, I would not blame people at all for getting their bunkers filled again. Because without that plan, empty shelves won't just be down to heightened demand from panic buying, but because there will be genuine problems with the supply chain. And there's another massive problem waiting in the wings as well. So if anyone watching this does the grocery shopping, you will know just how much fresh food we import from overseas. We can't just up production of that in the UK. In fact, when I was talking about this before the pandemic, I was just, based on what farmers say, we could increase our capacity a little bit, but we'd still need to import a hell of a lot of food. But actually, it's in a much worse situation now, because when it comes to British farming, we know at the moment we have food rotting in fields because we haven't got enough people to pick the fruit and veg. We're short of staff to do it. Food has been left to rot in the ground, couldn't be harvested, and this isn't just a problem for the UK. That was going to be a problem with Brexit if the government really followed through on its immigration plans, which of course they wouldn't. But because of the coronavirus, we got a taste of it early this year. It's not Brexit related, the fact we couldn't get these staff this year, or at least mostly it's not. But there's other countries as well, like Spain, that have had trouble as well. The end of the article reminded us of a report into the global food chain, and it explained that an optimistic outlook is that the food supply will shrink to 75% of capacity. Now, let that sink in for a moment. Optimistically, we are going to lose, on a global scale, a quarter of the food that we'd normally be capable of producing because of the effects of this pandemic, including food just left to rot. And of course, that's going to most severely impact the poorest countries. But there will be an impact, of course, for countries who choose to remove themselves from the international community. And then we're planning on making that situation even worse by cutting off British farming at the knee with our Brexit plans. And this isn't even trying to consider how the final quarter of 2020 might actually be impacted by the consequences of Boris Johnson's approach to the coronavirus pandemic. Because I don't even want to speculate what that's going to look like. But there it is. I hope you found the video interesting. If you did, don't forget to click the like button. If you'd like to support the channel further, please also click the Patreon link for details. And until next time, I'll see you later.